It's time for Tech Talk with Mathew Dickerson, and I'm your host, Tony Graham. Good morning, Matthew.
Hey, good morning, Tony. Great to be talking technology again.
It always is, and we've got lots of interesting topics today, this morning and this afternoon as well, so you should stay tuned to us later in the day to get the second episode. First came off the rank this morning is the effectiveness of technology in reducing our road toll, and I have to say, it's been very effective, hasn't it now, Matthew?
It has been effective, very effective. And in fact, there's a new study that's just come out to say it could be even more effective. One of the issues this study's identified is that there are lots of technology features that are only available in the more expensive models or in the features that you might add on as accessories rather than being standard. And the argument being put forward is that if some of these features were standard, and the report was out of the US, they said that 20,500 US lives would be saved each year if all of these technology options that we've got now were just made compulsory by the by the government, and then all manufacturers had them on. And some of those things are quite interesting. So you've got emergency braking is one of those they've said is a absolute feature that should be made compulsory. And emergency braking obviously uses a radar at the front of a car to detect if you're approaching a solid object too quickly that you're going to either crash into it or hit it very hard. And so they basically apply the brakes, the car applies the brakes for you. And so that's one of the ones they've talked about in terms of a technology that could be used. Blind spot detectors is another one. Lane departure, so people are either dozing off or staying to change lanes when there's a car beside them. So they're probably the three main ones they say that could save a lot of lives. But then it starts to get into some that we don't see a lot of, and we don't see a lot of options for those. Things like, for example, checking that you aren't drunk when you get in the car. So there is still a lot of lives lost. And I find it incredible that people still do get behind the wheel of a car drunk. I thought we'd seen enough over the years to know that this is just an absolutely ridiculous thing to do, but people still do. So again, if you had to breathe into something, to have some sort of lock on your car to be able to start the car and basically drive off, there's lives to be saved there. And some of the pedestrian safety, 800 deaths would be saved annually if there was some pedestrian detection systems. So again, someone stepping out in front of a car and having some sort of detection system. So a lot of these things here, we've seen them. We've probably all driven in cars that have got some of these features. But again, if they were compulsory, a lot of lives would be saved.
Yes, Matthew. And the self-driving cars, I think they've already proved that they're safer. If they were rolled out now, there's still got flaws, of course, but so in the future, when that happens, this road toll thing could almost disappear, I would imagine.
Well, there's the Victorian advertising campaign that says they're aiming towards zero, and obviously that's where you could get to. If you did have all cars on the road autonomous, you'd have a thing called vehicle-to-vehicle communications, and that basically allows vehicles. If you think about a car driving along behind another car and you've got a human in control, we see the stoplights come on. Now, there's a pause from the time the person puts their foot on till the stoplights come on. Not a long pause, but a pause. But then we as humans have got to process that, and then we've got to physically move our foot to start to brake ourselves. So all that delay, that can cause an accident. If you've got vehicle-to-vehicle communications and autonomous driving, the vehicle in front can, as soon as it puts the brakes on, can distribute that information to all vehicles around it, and so a vehicle behind can start to brake immediately. So you're right, autonomous driving, you see some incidents in the press where something happens and everyone says, oh no, autonomous driving, let's throw that idea away. But autonomous driving, you don't have the vehicle get tired, you don't have the vehicle get drunk, you don't have the vehicle who gets distracted by a text message coming in. So you've got all these things, these advantages. We are still pretty incredible in what we can do when we're driving a car. But yeah, autonomous driving, I think, will end up being a dramatic reduction in the road toll, but it will rely on all vehicles on the road being autonomous.
That's right. Now, California has been at the forefront of emission control laws in the United States, if not the world, trying to reduce pollution. So what's the details of their latest moves to even clamp down further on pollution?
Well, they brought into law that you'll have to have zero emission trucks. All trucks and all vans sold in California will be zero emission by the year, wait for it, 2045. So it's not just around the corner, it is some way down the track, but obviously there's some planning involved in getting to new trucks, new vans. And so effectively they're basically putting the message out there that they're trying to reduce pollution, and they have done some fairly effective government strategies in the past to basically improve the number of electric vehicles, improve the pollution in California. And so they've been quite effective. And this is just another step along the way. Now, it's not just, okay, do nothing now and then in the year 2045 you've got to do something. There are some stepping stones along the way. And so, for example, with buses, they've said that all transit agencies must have all electric buses starting from 2029. So it's a bit closer. We're only 9 years away from that. And again, buses and trucks, even though they seem to be a bit slower than cars to get to the electric revolution, I think one of the great things about buses and trucks is that you've got a huge mass compared to a car anyway. So adding a large quantity of batteries and the large weight of batteries probably doesn't have as big an impact as it does on a car. So buses and trucks, it makes sense. So they've got some milestones to tick off along the way. They've got basically half of all trucks they want to be sold in the state must be zero emission by 2035. So another little stepping stone along the way. So you've got these little steps there. And I think they're going in the right direction. I think other states, certainly in America, could learn from what's happening there, and certainly other places around the world. And especially with that transport, because when you consider, and this is one of the facts that they brought forward, was that only 7% of vehicles on the road in California are this truck and van, but they're making up 70% of the pollution in the state. So there's a huge contribution they're making, even though there's only a smaller number of them on the road. But bring it on, I say. I'd love to see some of these rules come into place in Australia.
Yeah, and I think it won't be just electric cars there. It'll be hydrogen fuel, so-called electric cars that'll come into or trucks and buses. I think that will come into the equation somewhere.
Well, I was very excited the other day, Tony. I had a call from an acquaintance that I met a few years ago. I actually got to drive in a hydrogen car, and I won't say the brand name because it's going to be announced very shortly, but I was in Canberra a few years ago and I got to go for a drive. I wasn't allowed to drive this particular car, but I got to go for a drive in this hydrogen car. And it drove just like an electric car. I was very impressed with it because it is effectively using electric motors, and it's using a small battery to power that, and the hydrogen just basically produces the power. But I got a call from that particular person who I'd met a few years ago, and the newest version of this particular hydrogen car was available for me to inspect. Had a look at it, basically under wraps at the moment, but I think about 2 weeks' time you'll see this announcement, and part of that announcement will be some of the charging infrastructure for hydrogen vehicles. And people that get concerned about an electric vehicle taking too long to charge up, hydrogen will be even quicker than a normal petrol car. About 3 minutes they're talking about to fuel up this particular model of hydrogen car, and it takes about 6.3 kilograms of hydrogen. So, yeah, things are happening in that space as well.
And of course, with hydrogen vehicles, it can be used for an internal combustion engine, or it can be used to generate electricity for electric vehicles, and that's the interesting part about hydrogen, isn't it?
It is, and one of the people always want to criticise things. One of the things that they criticise about hydrogen is some of the people against it talk about the fact that you're using coal-fired power stations to produce hydrogen. But anyone that I know that's producing hydrogen at the moment, they're focused on renewables. And so Tasmania, for example, we've spoken here before about Tasmania trying to generate a whole industry around producing hydrogen, but they're doing that on the back of renewable power. And so that really takes that out of the equation pretty quickly.
It does. Now, Matthew, here's another interesting bit of technology. A pair of gloves is being used to help hearing impaired people communicate better. So how are they doing that?
Well, they've got some wearable gloves they've created that basically will translate sign language into speech and do it in real time. So you basically have a pair of gloves that are light, thin gloves. There's a transmitter sitting on the wrist of each of the gloves, and that's about the size of, say, a dollar coin or thereabouts, and that transmits back to your smartphone, and that then can be used to transmit sign language into text or into actual audible speech. So essentially what it means is you can have someone that is deaf having a conversation with someone that isn't deaf, but by using sign language, the conversation can flow much easier by converting it to text and audio as you go. So brilliant bit of technology. A lot of work was done where they basically took a range of people that were skilled in sign language, and they basically had the gloves learning what movements, what changes in their hands basically matched up to different letters or phrases, and then they basically program all that together, and you've got this ability then for people to sign at their normal speed, and that basically converts it at the rate of about 1 word per second via the app that you have on your phone. So brilliant bit of technology, and I see this sort of technology makes people's lives better.
I know a bit of sign language, thumbs up and thumbs down. few others.
A few others, that's right. That's about the extent of my sign language too.
That's about the extent of it. So I am quite ignorant. Matthew, well, thank you very much for the morning session, and stay tuned this afternoon at 3:40 and 3:40 every Tuesday in the afternoon for the next edition. And it's back to the great music and community information on Binjang.
Thanks, Tony.